Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Packaging Therapist. Today we're going to talk about rework. What is it? What does it mean to your business? How do you fix it? And what can you do? Today I am joined by Tom Hammond. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah. So I want to dig right into kind of like defining rework. What is rework in manufacturing? And then we'll kind of start talking around it and help people out.
Sounds
So
good.
help us define it.
Yeah, I think from my background, I worked in had leadership positions in three different food manufacturing plants. I've worked with some other clients outside of CPG, so it may vary the definition based on your industry or even sometimes within a company. But I'd say rework. Think about it as you are making some kind of product. You've got a spec for it. Hopefully, it goes through your line, and at some point, or maybe even at the end, you're at a point where you have to stop and it has to get reworked, which is never good, right? You're adding cost, labor, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes rework can be stuff you plan, like scrap that comes off
Yeah,
of a bar line or something that goes back in. But this is more around like the stuff you don't want, the stuff you don't plan for,
yeah,
and try to navigate around that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the quality risks. We'll talk a little bit about best practices. We'll talk a little bit about cost impact to losing that product and packaging, and then some of the ways you can monitor and prevent or address rework. Okay, so let's talk about quality. What happens in the rework process that can impact quality or safety? It's not really our wheelhouse, right? But we've been through
right.
enough to understand like when the stuff needs to get pitched, and when it can actually be, still sold. So tell me some stories that you have from your experience on in that spirit space around rework and quality.
Yeah, I think, especially in one thing I missed, I spent a lot of time working at corporate and you've got the different functions and everything. In a manufacturing plant, right? If you're doing it really well, quality is a valued part of your team. There's also an old saying that really it shouldn't be an add-on. You really want to build quality into your manufacturing line or your manufacturing systems and processes. So the fun thing with manufacturing is good days are really good and bad days can be really bad, right? Things can happen for a variety of reasons. I can tell you some crazy stories where if somebody's never worked in a manufacturing plant, they're going to go, dude, that really happened? Yeah, it can really happen. You get into the realm of can't make it up. And it can happen anywhere from just kind of sticking with the food industry, right? I know your areas in packaging. You may start with just ingredients, and I'm going to kind of worst case this. You could get bad or not to spec ingredients from a supplier, right? And hopefully you've got systems in place and you're doing spot checks and things. You start to mix something. So let's stick with your bars analogy, right? You're putting oats in and you're putting a syrup in and all those good things that are going to make that bar delicious. Did you miss an ingredient? Did you put it in the right order? Did you overmix it or undermix it, right? So then you're starting to extrude these bars. There's a couple different ways to make bars. I'm sending it down the line. Hopefully, you've got things that are quality checks, right? You're measuring weight. Maybe you're X-raying it. You're definitely metal detecting it to make sure there's issues. Tom, why would you have metal detection? Because equipment breaks, right? Suppliers, again, sometimes send you stuff that's got metal in it. A lot of the manufacturing system's metal. Sometimes it breaks. And then we get to your favorite part of the line, Jesse, packaging, right? Are your packaging specs good? Are you trying to put a really big bar into a really small wrapper or vice versa, right? So
Mm-hmm.
flow wrappers, cartoners, case packers, corrugated is its whole other headache sometimes, especially if it's sitting outside in a humid warehouse and you try to bring it in. Um, so for a lot of reasons, right? As well as think about it, I've got system operators or I've got associates working on the line. If I've got good quality programs, they're pulling four samples and weighing them like every 15 minutes, right? As an
Right.
example, it could be less. I'm taking the packaging off the end and I may be doing like a destructive teardown on 1 unit
Mhm.
per hour, right? So I'm taking it. Do I have good fiber tear on my corrugated? Are all my minor flaps in on my cartons? The code date, yep, it's there. It's readable. I can see it. So you should be building it in. But for a lot of reasons, sometimes not necessarily you've got a bad process or bad people. You just, there's other things that can happen to your manufacturing system, which unfortunately you're not getting through on the first time according to your spec.
Mhm.
And then we're going to have that conversation of, should I rework this?
Right. And also, I think it's important to establish like those checklists of what you're actually observing. But then, if something like in packaging space, if you get product that falls off the conveyor, or you get some cartons that aren't
Right.
made correctly and need to rework those bars, having good processes in place for that as well. I know I shared a video about Rice Krispie, but like these, like they weren't the brand Rice Krispie, but they were little like Rice Krispie bars, and out of the same box, there were substantially different bar heights.
Okay.
And because I'm a nerd, I noticed that the date and timestamp on the wrapper was like 6 hours before the
Okay.
carton. And so when you think about manufacture, we don't know, I don't know what specifically happened, but some of the things that cause delay in from a bar, wrapping the bar to going into the carton, that should be like one process to the other,
Right.
especially with like large scale manufacturing. And so if there is a big gap, then you could think, okay, that could have been an indication of some downtime. So then let's say all these bars are in a tote. Let's say you've got a bar's product, right? And they all go into a tote. Well, the weight on the bottom is going to be a lot compared to what a bar would usually see, like,
Yeah.
stacked, lined up in a carton. And so when you're reworking product, it's really important to also make quality observations of the product while you're reworking it, because anytime you deviate from a manufacturing process, then you open the door to a lot of other issues that could potentially happen. Do you have any examples that you want to share, like around the similar?
No, I think you've hit on a couple good points, right? If it's, I would be a little concerned, like there was a 6 hour time gap, right? I think it's one, if you're monitoring your line and things are going well, then any kind of that rework, or sometimes you call it refeed, makes sense, right? And I know some folks aren't familiar with, say, food manufacturing. You're like, wait a second, didn't your line like rejected it, and you're gonna use it and sell it to me? Really
Mhm.
good example. Like I get it, the packaging. I'm supposed to have 6 bars in a carton, and I've only got 5 for some reason. It happens, right? We've seen that. It goes over the weight detector, and the weight detector says, "Hey, this is lightweight. The weight is below a limit you told me it was at. I don't think there's enough bars in there." So a little puff of air, it goes into a tote, food safety tote. Jesse, the operator, is walking by and goes, "Okay, let me check this. Okay, there's only 5 bars in there. Those are still good bars, right? We don't want to
Mhm.
throw those away that unnecessarily."
No.
So you take them back up the line, and hopefully you can refeed them. So I've seen, numerous times where you got to have like a gap, right? If you've got nonstop bars coming down the line, you can't just throw a bar in there and hope everything goes well. Probably going to have a jam down at the other end. I've also seen it where, let's say, your packaging entirely goes down. It is very difficult with some processing systems, like bars is a good example, right? There's that you made all those, this big batch of what stuff, Rice Krispie treats or the knockoff of, you're trying to get that out and down the line. I've seen it where it's all hands on deck, and we get everybody, and you're bringing it down and you're pulling it off the line,
Mhm.
because your case packer's down, right? So there's a
Right.
big jam. I'm pulling cartons off the line and I'm stacking them. They're still food safe, but then when I get it working, then I somehow have to get those cartons back in so that they can get into cases and go
Yeah.
down.
So that's kind of like adding an accumulation
Right, right.
space that isn't there all the time, but can kind of come in when you need it.
Yep.
Um, and so, have you seen any best practices or ideas around sort of creating interim accumulation
Yeah.
spaces? To,
I'm smiling a little bit, right? Because in the manufacturing community, you just get into healthy debates around. Sometimes you call it surge, right? So
yeah.
I do this, and I want a really long conveyor in case it gets backed up, or like an accumulation table, right? Like I've made frosting for cakes, and there's a part of the line that's just this big table, and there's tubs of frosting floating around, and they'll eventually go in there. But if my packaging goes down, it doesn't give me forever. Maybe it gives me 5 or 10 or 15
Yeah.
minutes to do it. There are other folks that would say, you know what, if Tom says I can have this little like fudge factor in here of this accumulation table, then he is not going to really work on getting his packaging, you know, so that it's like 99% uptime or really good system performance.
Mhm.
So we like to sometimes debate in manufacturing whether that's good or bad. I've also seen it where sometimes you don't have the real estate, right? It's shoehorned in there and you just can't add more equipment or
Right.
accumulation. And to your point, it could be something as simple as I've got a stack of metal shelves on wheels, and if I absolutely need it, I'm going to go grab it
Mhm.
and roll it in, and you and I are going to pull those cartons off and make sure those bars aren't thrown away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, that's a good point. And along those lines, specifically around packaging, and maybe you could speak about changes in operations too, but there are times when I've seen people, they want to save money on packaging. For example, sourcing got a better deal, um, and how important it is to test that material before confirming any changes, because coefficient of friction or
Yeah.
thickness, or I mean, even if those look similar, just the fact that the film is made in a different location, or it's corrugated, it's very much like that, where you could have the same specification and the corrugated will run completely different from one supplier to the next because of where the paper pulp comes from, the equipment they're running it on, how much recycled content it is in there. It's just it's crazy, and so I think there's a misconception often that you can just change materials, and if the
Right.
spec looks close, we should just go with it. Um, and that's kind of that's not a good thing at all. So you should have some kind of like phase in testing where you're testing for maybe a shift, and if that
Yep.
looks good, then you move on. And there's of course a lot of questions, and maybe you can weigh in on this, when you're testing, let's say, blank film, or you're testing something that you can't
Yeah.
sell, but you're trying to hedge risk of like, okay, I don't want my line to go down and then I don't have any packaging because I literally just fired my previous supplier.
Yeah.
How do you balance that risk between, okay, I've tested it, now I have unsaleable product or product I have to donate, and just like not testing enough and then failing in production.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories
Yeah.
from that?
Well, it's a great point, right? Because I think sometimes when teams get in trouble, you go back and you're like, okay, so let's talk through how did you run the plant test? Sometimes it's like, well, we didn't. Like you said, it's the same spec. It's a different supplier. Or let me give you a real. It was a supplier, same company, but they supplied it from one of their different plants. And like you
Mhm.
said, it's that packaging material could be very different based on fibers and temperature and humidity, you name it. Typically, what happens, right? You're working together as a cross-functional team. You come in and you're like, I've got this very robust testing program for the packaging to make sure it's good, and we look at it and we're like, man, you want to run for 24 hours and it's going to be $70,000 worth of material. And yep, then I can guarantee it. And you're like, oh, can we do like one pallet and I'll let you run it for 2 hours? Right. And so part of it is
Yeah.
cost. It could be equipment availability. Coefficient of friction was, like, I'm in manufacturing plant. I'm like, what is that term? Sounds cool. Right. Oh, it's slippery or it's not slippery. Oh, I got it. Right. So when your cartons are too slippery, they're not going up my conveyor belt. They're sliding. And then pretty soon my entire line's backed up and we didn't catch it. Right. Not to say
Right.
that even with a really good plant test, something can't happen. The corrugated story is fantastic. I mean, in Lodi, California, talk about during the day 105 degrees Fahrenheit and zero humidity. So what happens when everybody goes home and night shifts running? The temperature drops to 60 degrees Fahrenheit and it gets really humid because the fog rolls in from the Bay Area into the Central Valley. Your corrugator runs totally different, right? So
Mhm.
there's definitely things in a manufacturing environment you can sometimes adjust for variability in packaging,
Yeah.
but yeah, sometimes you can't, and you got to know that up front.
Well, and to that point, having setup sheets. Um, I've worked for
Yeah,
places where everyone just kind of has something like a little notebook where they have all their
yeah,
equipment settings, but that really leaves you open to a lot of risk. If you have somebody set that creates the setup sheets for the equipment, so that if you're troubleshooting, you at least know what used to
right.
work. Um, and then, I mean, we could kind of go down the path of preventative maintenance and wear and tear, and how, I mean, that all of that um, adds to the cost. And I think a lot of people look at, for example, preventative maintenance as a cost, and it
Yeah,
is, but like going down is always a bigger cost. Um, and
always.
it's a balancing act too. But
Yeah,
machine wear is a big deal. Maybe it's not a critical failure, but you just start seeing like your rework or your
yeah,
rejects like tick up, or your OEE start dropping. Um,
yeah. You think about equipment and the tension you're pulling on a film. If you're making vertical pouches or even horizontal pouches, yeah, and you could have the same spec. And I think about a plant I worked with in Iowa, right? We're making um, horizontal pouching lines. We're using pretty much the same film spec, but it's 5 different lines. And you've been in enough plants to know different lines will have different personalities, right? You can't look
yes,
at it and say, hey, those are all from the same manufacturer. Some of them are a little older than others, but they're the same system. They should run exactly the same. They don't,
right.
right?
No,
Like to your
never.
point, it's the age of the parts, it's the maintenance, it's the environment. They can run a little bit differently. So it's one of these, how strict do you want to be with your packaging spec, and then hopefully you've got manufacturing systems that can handle a little bit of variability, right? That doesn't make sense. If I come back as a manufacturer and I say, Jesse, my equipment can only run if the packaging spec is like really tight and it's perfect, then we're going to have some really really expensive packaging, right? We
Yes.
there's again, it's gives and takes. We want something that's going to run well, be high quality, but in manufacturing I got to handle a little bit of variability too, or
Yeah,
be
that
able
makes
to
sense.
adjust. Yeah,
Is there anything you can say around how do companies typically track rework in, let's say they are or they aren't using OEE, those different
yeah,
throughput metrics. What are some what are some things that you've noticed in the past around tracking rework? Because I think one of the challenges is, at the end of a day, or maybe it's the start of your day, and you're looking at the OEE and what happened, the previous day, week,
yeah,
month. um, Data doesn't always tell the whole story. It can be kind of an indicator that there is some issues
yeah.
somewhere. But can you explain a little bit of how people can take a look at the data that they have as an indicator of rework is a problem, or of course there's shift reviews, and
Yeah.
there's people are always willing to share their opinion, but you know because if you're when you're working when you're not on the floor all the time, you don't see it all, and
Right.
you're relying on data. So like, how do you get a story or picture from data?
Yeah, I think it's good, right? I always say I work a lot in cost savings, and I say that regardless of what function you're in, everybody should speak finance, right? So oftentimes your numbers, and you hit on a lot of it, it could come up in a morning production meeting, a change of shift meeting. There's a lot of ways you could see it. I'd say rework, it's going to happen at some point. You want to make sure it's an exception, right? If it's
Yeah.
happening more than once, so every couple of weeks, then you're right. And then you need to get in and figure out how big an issue is it. Um, One of mine, right, is the morning production meeting if you ask the right questions. As an operations leader, you can't lead behind the desk. You got to get on the floor, right? So you walk the floor. If I'm working with clients, and you and I have done this, like, first thing you want to do is like, okay, show me through your plant. Like, let's start at the front office. Yep, let me see the quality lab, but let's go out there. Well, you don't need to see the warehouse. It's just a warehouse. There's just stuff in there.
Yeah.
I started as a warehouse team leader on third shift. You can find a lot of good stuff in the warehouse, right? So let's walk through. I was with a client in Maryland a couple of months ago, and there's just stacks of stuff that look like it's finished product, right? It wasn't food. So it's a little bit of a new industry to me with some of this manufacturing. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, you guys are sitting on, is this just a ton of extra inventory and everything? Couple tags on it. They're like, nah, we got to kind of go back and kind of fix a little bit. And it was a lot. I mean, and so it will happen sometimes, but are you also going through it? Do you have, again, are you building in quality checks into your system to where you're hopefully it's a rarity or it's an exception? I'd say if you do see it more frequently, right? I always try to put a dollar figure on it. right? Because at the end of the day, or a percentage, right? We have talked before about sometimes, especially in food, you have a really high waste percentage with some products or some systems.
Mhm.
That's an
Yes.
opportunity to go improve, right? Every dollar you can fix is a dollar you can put in back in your pocket or give it to marketing and sales to help grow your business.
Well, and also I think people need to compare profit on certain
Yeah.
products and how efficiently they run, right? So as you're thinking about SKU rationalization or like, is this product really worth it? When sales is like, well, we need that product because that customer is staying with us just because we have that, you
Yeah.
know, pineapple watermelon flavor. And you're like, okay, this is the true cost of pineapple watermelon. Is this something
Yeah.
that we want
I'm
to
laughing
consider?
because, right, I used to say I used to work on the Betty Crocker business back when she was young. She just turned 104. She still looks great. She's got good products there. I was actually part of the team that launched the 27th flavor of cake mix, right? Do consumers actually need 27 flavors?
I mean, it seems extra.
It is a lot of extra. I would also say that as part of a cost savings effort, I was also part of the team that discontinued six. Right? We had literal sales tiers in the room, but we got rid of six. We got rid of the complexity. Cake mix, though, is and I think you brought up a good point about your different products, right? Cake mix, you should be down like 1 or 2% waste on something like that. You may have other products that are just they are not designed well, or maybe even the packaging isn't designed well, or we really need to run it, but your manufacturing system doesn't work. I've had to run refrigerated dough products where it was a piece of dough that had some delicious cinnamon smear in it, and it had to be twisted in a way that there was, at the time anyway, no automation in the world that could do that. So I had 16 people out on a line hand twisting dough, and I would tell you the first couple runs, Jesse, there were some variations that we were like trying to figure out, because once it went into the freezer, it's done. You really can't, it's
No,
frozen. I can't untwist it, right? We actually
right.
figured out we needed left-handers on one side of the line and right-handed people on one side of the line, so that when everybody twisted it, it would all
No
be
way.
uniform. It was crazy. It was one of the wildest projects I ever worked on. Really tough customer on us, but it's the kind of thing that in manufacturing you want to support the business, you want to do the best you can, and sometimes you just, whether it's a packaging or a product or an ingredient or something, sometimes you have to just kind of make the best out of it. The waste or the inefficiency, or sometimes it causes rework, is still there. It's an
Yeah.
opportunity to get better.
So one thing you said, like cake mix, you said 1% waste. So when you think about
One
waste,
or two, one or two.
okay, let's go one or two or three, whatever. Let's go two. That's fine. But in that,
Yeah.
so when you say waste, is that does that is waste is rework a component of that if the rework is not saleable product, or is if it's not saleable, it's no longer rework. It is waste. Like what was that 1% or 2% number?
No, I think that would be the like you put 100 pounds. Sometimes we call it a scrap rate or an overuse
Mhm.
rate.
Yeah,
Like very simply, let's put 100 pounds of ingredients into a system. If I get 98% out, that's
yeah,
pretty good. The
2%.
analogy I use, right? Do you like to make chocolate chip cookies?
I like when other people make them for me.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so other people are making chocolate chip cookies for you, right? You're mixing it up in your home mixer and everything. You can't get 100% of the dough out of the bowl, off the
Right?
beaters. Maybe you spilled a little flour on the counter.
Maybe someone ate
That's okay.
some.
You're making cookies, right?
Yeah,
Maybe you burned a batch, or there's just, it was towards the end of the sheet and it got, whatever it is.
yep,
It's really, really difficult to get 100 pounds in and then 100 pounds out. So there are definitely points, like you mentioned, that you can rework it if it's still on the line. It's still
yeah,
perfectly food safe. There's other points, like we said, once my cinnamon twist goes into the freezer,
right.
it's
You're
frozen.
done.
I can't, yeah, I'm
Yep.
done. I can't do it. Or we get through packaging and it looks like it's good finished product, and then we do the analytics in the lab and something's wrong with it, and then
Yeah.
that's worst case, right? You've got product that you spent all this time and money and effort on, and you can't send it
Yeah.
to a food bank. You got to landfill it, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. So, back to we were talking a little bit about OEE.
Yeah.
What are some of the is so is it like is it is rework would then show up as um, a decrease in throughput.
It
Do
would be if
people?
you think about it like the if you can keep the line running and you've
Yeah.
got call it gaps in the line where you can refeed
Okay.
those bars, right? We took those
So it's like
five
the
bars out.
refeed,
Yeah, I'm not
rework.
shutting down the line. I've seen others, right, where you had a pretty bad manufacturing incident or you were down for a long time. And
Yeah.
let's say, like to the example we were talking about, like I've got a bunch of bars on shelves. If the run is over and I've got to keep the line running for an extra hour to
Yeah.
refeed all that, to rework it, now I've just spent an extra hour in labor, utilities,
Right.
maybe maintenance costs. So sometimes you can rework it as the line's going and kind of I don't want to say cover it up, but it's in there. Other times you
Yeah.
can't, and you're going to incur additional costs.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to. Like, because if you
Yeah,
do if you do feed it, right, you're refeeding it essentially. Then how do you how would like an operations person see the problem essentially,
yeah.
right? Because like maybe we did make a packaging change, and so it wouldn't be directly showing up on like an OEE report. So how do you? What are other ways that you can like detect that? Is it the shift reports or whatnot? Do you know?
Yeah, it could be shifted, and it depends on how sophisticated you are, right? I get into this where I would been in clients where they've got photo eyes and they've got data systems and everything to where they can get real time reports of what's happening on the manufacturing
Mhm.
line. And then if they've got that, they could probably tell me, okay, I ran at say 90%, right? So 10% of my shift I was down.
Yep.
Okay, why? Because that's the question, right? In
Yeah.
manufacturing, you wanna get to root cause. You want to ask your five whys. If I'm pretty sophisticated with my data and my sensors out on the line, I look at it and I'm like, wow, 8% of it, or 8 percentage points of that 10, it was all at case packing. All right, let's go
Yeah.
down and look like. But and hopefully maybe it depends on what level I'm at or where I'm at. Maybe I knew it was going on. Maybe somebody called me. Maybe on the radio I heard somebody calling for maintenance, or you're right, like not that you've ever heard this, right? Hey, we got a bad pallet of cartons. Somebody call quality.
Never happened.
What is packaging engineering doing these days? They're getting the cheap stuff. Come
It's always
on,
the packaging's
this
problem. It's always
supplier.
their
I hate
fault.
that. It's not me in manufacturing. It's that supplier. They're giving me bad
Right.
stuff to run,
They
right?
need to
So
do that.
hopefully that kind of stuff pops. Others where you're not as sophisticated, you don't have that. It's
Yeah.
I mean I worked in a plant where it was clipboards and we were writing down issues because
Yeah.
we
I
knew
mean,
hey we have low system performance or OEE, we need to get better. Like for this week, let's just track and figure out where it is, right? I can't go everywhere, but I need to figure out where the big buckets are and why I'm getting
yeah.
downtime. Yeah.
And in terms of rework and monitoring, I mean, there's different programs like Red Zone or whatnot. Are there, and certainly you can get as sophisticated as you want.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of preventing rework, I know we talked about doing, I think I've seen a lot like 4 checks an hour,
Yeah.
sister product. Then you've got your retains and you've got the ones you're baking while you're making the product. But do you see anything coming like that could be helpful, or any tips or tricks around um, observing moments where rework has happened and then like root causing it? I know you mentioned like the
Right.
YY tool, but yeah, just because it's a big issue, and it's not only a big issue because you potentially lose revenue, but it's
You're right.
also very frustrating for people working on the line
It
when
is.
the
Yeah.
line's always going down, and then they're like they're rushing around, they don't get a bathroom break, and it's just like it's chaos. And nobody wants that environment for their employees. It's already hard enough to find employees that come to work every
Yeah.
day. So it's a win-win if you can have a more peaceful manufacturing
Yeah.
um, scenario. So say a little bit of what you've seen in that.
Yeah, I think, back to the rework, and we probably have not emphasized enough the value that your quality and food safety manager is going to bring to the table. I tell folks, I'll be in some manufacturing plants and they're like, hey, you've been around, you've seen a lot of stuff. Can you help us out with our food safety program? No, I cannot, right? I know a lot. I know about HACCP and GMPs, and having worked in 3 plants as an ops leader, you got to know food safety. But these days it's become so heavily regulated. You really need
Yeah.
a professional, right? Especially, and I tell this a lot to startups, right? Do not go, I get it. You're startup, you're scrappy, you don't have a lot of money. Don't go cheap on food safety and quality, right? You're just going to get in trouble. Your brand is going to be in the news for all the bad reasons. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So on a lot of these, right? Again, you want to make rework. It's an exception. When it does happen, you've got processes in place on how to troubleshoot it. Your quality team member is part of those discussions. Um, and then back
Yeah.
to the back to just the troubleshooting. You make a good point on the quality, right? I don't want to come in and work 8 hours on something that crashes. The analogy I'll use with folks is if you're driving your personal car and it breaks down every 15 minutes, you're going to be pretty frustrated, right? You are not going to like
Mhm.
whatever brand of car you're working with. And sometimes
Right.
that can happen in manufacturing, right? You're like, it breaks down every 15 minutes. It may not break down. There may be a jam here. There may be an issue over here. There may be something out of alignment that stops the line. But if you're working on something and it's shutting down frequently,
Yeah.
yeah, 8 hours can feel like a lifetime. So back to your
Yes.
point, working on that's going to give yourself a positive culture. You always want to get better every day. It's a kind of that continuous improvement mindset in manufacturing. It's nice when you can come in and have a solid shift, put
Mhm.
out quality product, hit your numbers, and there's no major headaches or drama, and you can go home. That's a nice
Yes.
shift.
Well, I think there's other, some things to observe too around what you were saying earlier about like you've got 100 pounds. Did you get 100 pounds out of the system?
Yeah,
And it's also important to look at yield as well. Like, did you make, okay, so if you take out what, you put in 100 pounds, but you only got 98. Okay, well then did you get at least that amount, the amount of packages you expected?
right.
You don't want to be over, you don't want to be under, but there's a balance between being under the net weight, declared net weight, and then over all the time.
Right.
That could be a whole separate show. But just looking at everything, kind of stepping back, even if you have vision systems. I was working with a client who had vision systems because they wanted packaging to go better. So they were visually inspecting with cameras their
Okay.
product so that the product that was out of spec wouldn't get to packaging. Then they realized that so much of their product was out of spec that they just opened up the spec. And
Yep.
so then you're like, oh, cool. So you have the tool, but you're not using it right because it's not really a packaging problem. I mean, the product isn't fitting into the bag because it's not the right spec. So then kind of going back from there and then really having continuity of conversation between packaging and the upstream processing, that they're working as a team, and that the collective output and the quality that comes out
Yeah.
of the plant is like everybody's invested in that,
Yeah.
because it's tricky. I mean, manufacturing is really difficult. I think
Yeah.
people think, okay, you're making like 600 things a minute. Like that's crazy. That's wild. Like, that must be easy once you get it going, right? And it's like it's not. It's
It's
never it's
not.
never easy.
Yeah, and I mean, you make a good point, Jesse. Everything has to work, right? Like from when stuff comes in the door of your plant, right? You need procurement to do a really good job with suppliers. So
Mhm.
you're getting quality ingredients and they show up on time, right? During COVID, I was working with a client and they had been down like almost 90 shifts, right? Just because their stuff wasn't showing up. And again, that's kind of an extreme circumstance, but
Yeah.
if all it takes is one ingredient not showing up and you got a lot of people sitting around and nothing to do, and
Hmm.
then you need good manufacturing processes. You also need your packaging. Even
Yes.
if you've got it. The other story I remember in Lodi, it was I-80, Interstate 80. There's Donner Pass up there, right? So the famous story about the settlers that got caught up in the pass for winter and really bad things happened. The weather can still impact you, right? I think if we were missing cartons, which got shipped from a supplier in the Midwest, I could go in and talk to my planner and quite like he'd call the trucking company, and the truck was either up at Donner Pass because there was winter, they were snowed in or blocked, and he was trying to put chains on the truck, or in the summer there could be fires, right? And they would close the pass. So
Yeah.
there's so many things out of your control sometimes. You plan for the best. It's the things that are controllable, right? Like your
Right.
packaging spec, your program with quality, your supplier management, the training of your operators on the line.
Mhm.
So many things need to go well. So, like you said, you're running a production schedule, and if they need the 100 pounds at the end of the shift, you need to make the 100 pounds because there's likely sales commitments, and you need to sell that product. So
Yeah,
you don't
for
want to come
sure.
up short, and then you also, if even if you're having a good day, you don't want to make too much, right? You're tying up too much money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Inventory
Yes,
is money, right? It's tied up cash you could do other
it
things with.
is.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I think we covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining the
Yeah, you're
show.
welcome. I appreciate the invite. Good chatting. Rework is not like, hopefully folks have gotten some good insights on it. Not something you want
Yeah,
to do all the time, but
no.
minimize it and have a plan for it. Engage your quality folks, and make it an exception, not the
Right.
norm in manufacturing.
It happens, but
It happens.
get better, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's all
Sounds good.
possible. Thank you.
All right. Take care.